I hope the sun is shining in Carrickmacross. I think it is.
Yes, yes, lovely.
To begin, where were you born, Anne? Where are you from?
I'm from a wee village called Reestown, which is just outside Ardee, County Louth.
Right.
And I pass the house I was born every time I travel that road. I'm one of 7,
Right.
2 girls and 5 boys.
Wow.
And my father and my aunt were the local primary teachers,
That was very convenient.
as was their father and mother, as was their grandfather and grandmother. Some ancestor, I'm not sure, was a hedgemaster. There's a record of a Michael Matthews teaching in the stable beside the church in Reestown.
Right.
So that's my heritage, if you like.
I presume that primary school then.
Sorry?
That primary school.
Yes, it was a wee school, a 2-teacher school called Clint, built in 1840, and practically I've done research on that, and the Matthewses have taught there for years. So my aunt taught me for the first half of my primary school, and then my father taught me for the second half.
Right. After primary school, where did you go?
Yes, well, by right, I should have gone to Ardee because I'm County Louth, but my father's aunt was a Louis nun, Sister Lagori Matthews, and she lived in Carrick. And because she was there, my aunts went to school there and all my cousins, and therefore the 2 girls went to school there in Carrick as well. So an accident, I suppose you could say. But I enjoyed my school, although it was a big change from the country.
Yes.
To a boarding school. That was, I suppose, one of the biggest culture shocks at that stage of my life. Anyway, it's only looking back on it, I know that. And but before I went to school, I remember at the age of 7 seeing a nun. Probably some relative, I don't remember, seeing this being with a long dress and a veil and that, and I decided I wanted to be a nun. And when I was about 12, I don't know whether you ever saw the Holy Rosary film. The Holy Rosaries went around recruiting as well, and they showed a film of Jesus going up to heaven and saying, "Go teach all nations." And then when I went to Carrick, when I went to Carrick and I saw, if you like, nuns, real nuns.
Yes.
I wasn't too sure. So, but it was always at the back of my mind, and I struggled with it. And when I left school, I still wasn't decided, and my parents, they knew what I wanted to do, but they thought it was not a good idea to go just straight from school. So I made this agreement that if I got carries for primary teaching, which was 2 years, I'd take it. But if I had to go to university, that was 3 years. And I said, no, that's too long. I don't know what the difference between 2 and 3 is, but anyway, that was my sign. And so the results came out and I didn't get my honour in Irish, so that counted out primary teaching. So I still struggled with it. It was only really at the very end of August, somebody sent me papers to apply for a telephonist or something, or civil service or something like that. And you know, when you're faced with another option, you say, well, that's it. Yes. I don't want that. And I got up that day and I says, I'm going to Monaghan. And probably entered in about 5 or 6 weeks after that, you know. So that's it. Joined Monaghan, and I spent 5 years in Monaghan. I must have been a late developer.
I think you have a different novitiate from some of the rest of us. I think Vatican II had come by the time it actually had started when I was in the novitiate. So were there any changes when you were in the novitiate?
Oh yes, we had years, if you like, of the old regime. We had Mother Dolores and Sister Ivan. So a lot of things hadn't changed from the old regime. But we spent canonical year preparing for that 69 chapter, that famous chapter. We were getting ready blankets and sheets and embroidering chapter on them and all the rest. So we were aware that this chapter was going to happen in the summer. And then that was when Sister Columkill was elected. And Kathleen Kelleher then was appointed novice mistress for us. And I think the most significant, I've considered it a very symbolic change. You know, in the ground floor of the novitiate, we had, as you go in the door, there was on the right-hand side, there was a rostrum and an altar and a statue of Our Lady just inside the door. And for Halloween, Kathleen had all of that removed and put down at the bottom of the room, and it uncovered a fireplace. So she got the chimney cleaned. We lit a fire. She actually put a mat in front of the fire and easy chairs around the fire. And I think we shared nuts or something for Halloween. But to me, it was very symbolic of the change. You know, we were becoming, if you like, more human and more homely.
It's nothing like that in my day.
No. So that was, and that was around the time when we were listening to tapes on Van Cam.
Okay.
And other scripture scholars as well about the historic Jesus, and you know, things were opening up at that stage. I stayed on 2 more years in Monaghan, and then I went to Ramsgrange, and again that was significant in that after Monaghan it was less institutional. The Wexford weather, it was full of sky. You weren't surrounded by little hills. And the sisters there were very human and compassionate. And I really loved Ramsgrange. And I was really only there 1 year, but as a student from UCD, I used to go back there in the summers for holidays and that. And that was a great experience. UCD was difficult, but I had 1 year in Maynooth, which I enjoyed, and I there with him.
Anyways,
You know, in Ballygorn House. We loved cooking and we had a great time there. Even though we had €9 was the budget for food for the week. And there were, I think, 9 of us in the house. And we shared rooms on that, but it was a good experience. Going from Maynooth to UCD, I found it very difficult. It was very impersonal. And it was a new campus. Do you remember Belfield?
Remember Belfield? When I was in Belfield, it was just the science block. And
yeah,
on my last year in Belfield, the part of the arts block was ready, and some of the art students came out from Earlsford Terrace and spoiled our little cozy science thing with our own building and canteen and whatever. And
yeah.
we had to go over there it was getting very, very loud. We knew everybody in the science block.
Yeah. Well, it got very impersonal, and I hated the cement The buildings were just all cement and square, and I just hated it. After Maynooth and the beautiful gardens in Maynooth and beautiful historic buildings. Anyway, after that I went to Monaghan. I suppose the 70s were my Ramsgrange and student years, and then the 80s was Monaghan. As a teacher, I did history, geography, and religion. And I used to say I taught more religion through my history and my geography than I did under the official religion class, you know. It was good, but I know looking back on it now, I found it very stressful in the sense that you were very programmed to a timetable. And you may have a class up at the top of the new school, 3 stories up, and your next class was up at the top of another building. And you were always very, you know, tied to time. Yes. And there wasn't much time for personal, you know, contact with the pupils. You'd be aware that maybe a child had lost her mother or something, and there was very little time to actually.
School at that day school at that time.
It was, yes. I saw that over, you know, in the 70s especially, and the 80s. The early 70s, when I was in Monaghan, you could see every summer Paddy and Colm and his father, they all, you know, they changed a dormitory. They took out all the wooden partitions, and they made classrooms just over a summer. There was no such thing as planning permission or anything else. They just got on with it. And every year there was an increase in classrooms and the decrease in the boarding school. And it happened almost seamlessly. And thank God that St. Louis did opt for free education at the time, because it made such a difference, you know. And we were able to let go of our, you know, our name as being, you know, a boarding school and very high standards and all that, because naturally the standard, you know, in some things did decline because of our option to have free education and to accept everybody, no matter what ability. So that was good.
So you go after Monaghan then? Yeah,
during Monaghan, Anne Staunton and Katie in the early 80s, and they both went to Brazil.
They were they were St. Louis sisters.
Oh yes, both. Katie Dugan, Anne left later on from Brazil, but and they both wrote long letters describing every detail of life in Brazil. And I was also attracted. I would have read up on liberation theology, and I was also kind of looking for a different church. I found I was on a parish committee, parish council in Monaghan, and it was very hard to make any progress in terms of lay involvement or lay decision making and that. So I was very attracted to that. And towards the end of the 80s, well, I did a year in Mount Oliver, which probably also solidified my whole spirituality, if you like, and vision. And when I was approaching, I was born in 49, so I was approaching my 40th birthday and I said, well, it's now or never. If I don't do it now, I'll never do it. So I applied to go to Brazil. And it was a big decision, but I seem to, you know, once I make my decision, that's it. I just go with it. And it was life-changing. Brazil was life-changing in lots of ways, as I'm sure Africa was to you. Yeah. The biggest, well, it was a very good experience in one sense, but difficult when you go to a new country and you can't speak the language. Anything you've done before doesn't matter. You are just hopeless, without power, if you like. You just have your non-verbal communication and nothing else. And it's a difficult time, but I found it very good because it puts you on the margins. you're without power and you're without a voice. And
Yeah.
I found that a very good experience. Because later on I could see so many in Brazil who were, as they say there, sem voz, sem vez, without a voice, without an opportunity or a time. So that was a good experience. We looked after the churches. We were, as I say, we were like the priests in the sense somebody was appointed parroch, which was nearly like parish priest or in charge of the parish. We tried to organize the parish in small cells or sebis, as they were called, community, based groups with leaders in each. And we tried to work that way, and it worked because we only had a priest anyway once a month. Priest came once a month to say mass. And then in between times, the people and ourselves, you'd sit down on a Sunday afternoon and look at the readings and decide what your theme is and what the songs would be, the hymns, and give the homily. And it worked out. It was very much a people's celebration,
Yeah.
And then we did the baptisms and we did the weddings and the funerals, of course. The funerals happened just overnight anyway.
Yes.
And that was just, people got used to that. But our whole focus as St. Louis was to train leaders, to do ourselves out of a job.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah. And especially primary health care. It was one area that was badly needed because infant mortality was very high. And what do you do when people haven't got the basic necessities, basic food? Naturally children are going to pick up diseases and they're vulnerable. So the primary health care was a big project. I don't know whether you ever heard of Cardinal Arns. He was a bishop in Sao Paulo, Cardinal Arns. He was very famous. His sister, a doctor, Dr. Zilda, she started this primary health care, and she used the parish structure and the diocesan structure. So there was like Elenisi is the diocesan leader in Brazil today. And then she has parish leaders. And then within the parish, you had sectors and street leaders. And they kind of kept an eye on the children under 6. And every month there was a weigh-in where the children were weighed, and we usually had a snack and that. But every meeting, every weigh-in was started with a little scripture reading and sharing. So it was kind of connected. I could talk all day about Brazil, but
I'm sure you could. I take it you were proficient in the language by that time.
Well, yes. It took me a year, really. We were in a language school. There was a Holy Rosary Irish sister and myself. We were the only 2 Irish. And there were a lot of Italian and Spanish and Portuguese. And they found it very easy to learn. And they kept telling us, fala Portuguese, speak Portuguese, and here we were in class learning, I am, you are. Sure, we couldn't string a sentence together, and it was most frustrating.
Sure.
Thank God, and Griffin, she was the Holy Rosary. She was a niece of Levinus, our sister Levinus.
Okay.
Yeah, so we got on well, and we used to have to escape for a pint or something. But that was very frustrating. But when Elenisi came to live with us in Baharlandia, I was living with Joan Kavanagh, Lord Mercy, and Judy Dieterle first in Baharlandia. And then when Elenisi came, it just meant we had to speak the language all the time.
So
we didn't speak to each other in English anymore. And then we made it, you know.
Yes.
You started thinking even in Portuguese, you know, and dreaming in Portuguese.
Right.
Yeah, yeah. I was 6 years, I think, in Baherland, and it was like the Wild West in lots of ways, you know, big wide street, dusty,
Yes.
people coming in on horseback, cowboys, and but it was lovely, and I love the Brazilian people are so friendly and so human, you know. Something that maybe the Western world had lost is that sense of humanity and generosity. If they were at their dinner and somebody came in, they would divide their dinner. The phrase was vamos almoçar, come and have lunch.
It was
If somebody
in Nigeria too.
Nigeria, yeah, we've lost.
There was food for them.
Yeah, we'd be worrying about it's not enough or one thing or another, but they were just what they had, they will share.
Yes.
I probably at that stage too, I was getting uneasy about my mother was living on her own out the country. She didn't drive. And she was getting more infirm and that. So I had to discern, if you like, you know, where was my call. So I came home and there was an opening in Belfast in Jordanstown. Dimna O'Daly was retiring and I took it. And I found that the culture difference there even more so than Brazil.
Even today, to cross the border is a culture shock.
Yeah. You just had to learn, you know, the way in Dublin, you'd say, what part of Dublin are you living in? Or what part of Dublin are you from?
Yes.
You just wouldn't ask that.
No. You couldn't even say your surname. You dare
Yes.
Surname.
Yeah. And you would think when you'd hear the name, you began thinking.
Yes.
In a certain way.
Exactly. My mother was
which I hated.
A lot about it.
Yeah. The only thing we could do is provide a space where different people from the different traditions came in and you would find something neutral to talk about. Maybe it's the computer program. One lad would say, I'm finding that Java program very difficult to manage. And I'd hear someone else talking about it. And, you know, you try and get them to talk to each other.
Yes.
Which was probably a new experience for them. But I was going home every weekend as well. So I did find it all very stressful there. So eventually I made the move to Carrickmacross. There was a social housing scheme opening. And it was started by a Franciscan priest, Pat Colgan. And he asked, would there be any religious willing to live in the housing estate? So Pauline Hawhian, Ballymena was closing, and Pauline and I moved into Convent lands, as it was called, and that was good. Everybody in our row was probably in their 20s.
Okay.
And they all were single. They were single mothers mainly. They were lone parents. So it was and we were close to the people there. I loved that. And we helped with the after school, helped the children with their study after school. And there was a creche there too. You might end up minding the babies as well as the school going children. So that was good. And after, I don't know, 12 years, we moved into the convent here because, well, I could see that eventually I'd say, you know, the convent was going to close because it was such an old building and it was costing an awful lot to maintain.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's it. during that time too, I suppose I should say I am interested in nature and gardening and that. And in Brazil, I had a garden, and we tried to encourage people to have their own garden, or we had a community garden, what was called a community garden. And here I contacted a local politician that I knew he was interested. He was the Green Party, so I knew he was in Vincent P. Martin. So we got a group together. We thought we might be having allotments up maybe, you know, in our housing estate, but it wasn't suitable. But eventually we got a piece of ground in the town. And so I've been involved with that since, and it's going very well. Beautiful community garden with fruit trees, all kinds of fruit trees. And then people take a plot.
It sounds wonderful.
It's lovely. It's beautiful. Yeah. We're all the time looking for funding, because the maintenance of it, you know, is well, mainly to cut the grass. We're working on the people are all volunteers who do it, you know, and some of them are not into wild wild grasses yet, you know.
Yes,
they're still in the old model of lawns, and
that's
nice.
more prevalent now.
Yes, yeah, we will get there.
That mine says a little spot in the convent grounds, just inside the gate on the right, and she's letting it. She wants to let it go wild.
Yeah, it's not that easy. We have a back lane here in Iona House, and I've been watching it, trying to cultivate some of the bee love, the plants that the bees love.
Mm-hmm.
During lockdown, it helped me to just observe what the bees like and what they don't like in terms of the flowers and food and that, you know.
Some there that dandelions are actually a very good source, very good source of pollen and that for the bees. And there's certainly plenty.
Yeah, I noticed
plenty of dandelions on Grosvenor Road.
Yes, well, I noticed traveling to Dublin and back, they have left the sides of the road now. The dandelions have been left.
Yes.
It was only last year during lockdown that I actually saw butterflies and bumblebees lighting on the dandelions.
Yes.
So, you know, I didn't have much respect for them up to that. Anyway, where should we go by now?
You did mention about having to leave the convent. That must have been fun.
Oh, yeah.
Convent and moving into the small
Iona
building.
Yes.
How ago is that?
It became obvious. Yes. Aramark, the managing company, they keep a check on a building, and they were doing a check on the electrical system, and they said it was really not safe. There were parts of it that hadn't been replaced. So when we looked at the cost of replacing the wiring, rewiring the convent and restoring it, being a listed building, it was much more than we could afford. The building was originally a castle, Essex Castle, and Lord Essex was one of the favorites of Queen Elizabeth I, but then he fell out of favor and he was beheaded. And as boarders, we used to believe that one certain corridor, the Golden Corridor, that he used to walk around there at night with his head under his arm. And we were kind of afraid of that corridor. Anyway, the building, the decision had to be made whether to restore it. And oh yeah, we didn't own the building. It was belonging to a trust. So we didn't even own it anyway.
Yes.
And so the decision had to be made. And of course, it really was obvious that we had to leave it. And that was very unsettling. There were 12 sisters in the house at that time, and some of them quite elderly. So each sister had to decide what she was doing, where she was going, what her preference was. Time, not knowing how many wanted to stay in Carrick or where would we live, and one thing and another. Anyway, long story short, we arrived up, 5 of us moved into Iona house, and Sister Enda, who used to be here, moved up to Belfast, and Sister Maureen moved out into the town. So the actual clearing of the house was just, I mean, the house was there since 1888.
Oh my.
Sisters. And there was an awful lot of stuff. But then
I said, I can imagine.
Yes. I mean, all during the summer, Pauline especially, she was great. Things, there was a car loaded up, and it was either going to a charity shop or a recycling centre. And in the end, then we got a company in to auction off what was left and to clear the house. And that wasn't easy. It wasn't easy on anybody. And like, there were so many cupboards, you'd be walking along a corridor and you'd realize in the wooden paneling of the thing, there was a cupboard in there with a shelf with more stuff up in the attic and everywhere, outside, everywhere.
Yes.
Anyway, it was done, and we got great help from Aramark at that time to come up here. They changed the radiators and they painted the house and knocked a wall in the kitchen. So we were, we're very comfortable now, here in our house. Have you been here?
Pardon?
Have you been here?
Not since you moved in.
All right, okay.
Yeah. I was going to say, can I wind up by asking you, have you been fulfilled in your life as a sister of St. Louis? Would you say?
Yes, I was looking back over it yesterday, and I said, I'm not going to be saying I went here and I did that and I went there. And I've just done it. I think I wanted to say that, the reasons why I entered and my image of God at that time has changed over the years. And the reason I entered and the reason I'm staying is different. But yes, I think this was meant for me, this type of life.
Yes.
And I do like the prayer aspect of it, and I like the searching for God. I suppose that's what it's about.
Yes.
Searching for meaning. And I'm still on the search, but I'm very happy to continue on the search. And community life, is not easy. And I've had my struggles in other ways as well, personally and family and everything. But somehow that thread of spirituality and the practice of quiet and meditation, it helps you through those times, and it gives meaning to life, So I'll saunter on for another while. It's hard to believe that I'm in my 70s.
I know. Hard to believe we're all in our 70s. That was very I said that was all very interesting, and thank you very much.
Well, I don't know. Went on. I hope it will be well edited.
Could be. We
Okay.
lost sound once or twice, but I think it was my internet connection. Anyway, Anne, thank you again, and
thank you.
good luck with the rest of the search.
Okay.
Okay, bye.
Bye.